Welcome to this episode of Flourishing Leadership. I'm your host, Guy Rogers, and our mission here is to help you unleash the full potential of your leadership calling. You can find out more about Flourishing Leadership at flourishing-leadership.com. My guest today is Kathleen Winn. Kathleen is a Christian conservative, a wife, mother, and grandmother. Kathleen started her career as a television journalist and currently is hosting Win Tucson Monday through Friday on 10:30 a.m. The Voice in Arizona. Kathleen spent almost 30 years in the real estate and banking industry. She served as the Community Outreach and Education Director for the Arizona Attorney General's Office from 2010 to 2015. Upon leaving there, she started a nonprofit to fight sexual exploitation and sex trafficking. Kathleen has worked tirelessly to bring about positive change, create awareness, and advocate for the vulnerable. She and her husband, Al, have been married for 25 years. They've raised 7 children and are the proud grandparents of 17 grandchildren. I first met Kathleen in 2015 when I assumed the position of president of Pinnacle Forum in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I'll add one thing to her bio. Kathleen is a real firecracker. And just as a kind of an interesting little anecdote, when I started at Pinnacle Forum, and Kathleen and I connected, I said, yeah, I'm so new here. I don't even know where the paper clips are. And the next time I met her, she showed up with a container of paper clips for me, which I still have sitting on my desk in front.
I love that. That's amazing.
Still have that. Haven't gone through all of them yet to this day. So anyway, Kathleen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Guy, and thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here today.
Okay, so let's begin with telling us a little bit about your story. We got your bio there, which kind of hits highlights, but how did you get from, where you were to at this place where you're fighting sex trafficking, sexual exploitation? You and I have talked about this. We've had some conversations about how I think you said Phoenix is one of the main intersections where this sex trafficking occurs. So tell us how you got from, point A to where you are today.
Well, when I was in my 20s, I sold real estate, and that was part of my bio. And I helped found a homeless shelter, which at that time wasn't sex trafficking and sexual exploitation wasn't even on the radar. It's only in hindsight that I can see that was an issue associated, that they are commingled. Not always, but at that time. So I started having a heart for vulnerable people early on in my career, and get through a career and end up at the Attorney General's office, where my job as the Community Outreach Director for the state was to warn consumers how they could become victims of crime. Well, one of those crimes was internet crimes against children. And when you are working with vulnerable children, you start to see all the places and all the intersections where predators or people that are trying to profit from children go. And when I left the AG's office, I had spent 4 years there working with prosecutors, working with law enforcement, and had all this education and really didn't know what I wanted to do. And because of those connections and those relationships, I just started to work on finding solutions to that problem. And when I did that back in 2015, which isn't that long ago, a lot of people still did not understand the connections of phones and how important those were to reach our children, and the content that our children were seeing, and explicit material. And now the hypersexualization in our schools, the hypersexuality, right. All these things have brought us to where we are. And I would say I've been on that journey. And as we've created more awareness, it seems like more insanity has occurred in the world. So I'm a subject matter expert in this area at this point. I've done a lot of work to change laws, work with law enforcement to bring them technology. And actually during my failed congressional run in the last cycle, we found 10 missing children because I was out talking about this issue. This is a really issue. And so whether, I didn't win through the votes, but clearly God used me and the voice he's giving me and the interest in this topic and on my heart to continue to serve him. And I say this is a mission from God. And Project 25 was a 10-year commitment from 2015 to 2025 that I would dedicate my life, my energy, my resources to finding better solutions to protect our children and to help those that are protecting us the most, which is law enforcement, first responders.
Okay. All right. So you clearly have been one who has exercised influence out there in the marketplace, and it reflects my belief in how to define leadership, which is leadership is the exercise of positive influence. And it's a simple definition because there's a lot of definitions for leadership, but I believe influence is a very critical aspect of leadership. I don't care what your role is, what your title is. If you're not a person exerting influence, and in this case, I call positive, constructive influence, you're really not leading. As a matter of fact, it also reflects Dallas Willard's definition of the kingdom and influence when he said, the kingdom of God extends as far as the reach of our influence. So in your experience now, we're talking, a lot of our listeners are marketplace leaders. How can they better exercise influence in the marketplace, especially in today's culture, which is becoming increasingly hostile to Christianity?
Well, I think I don't hide my Christianity. My radio show, we're not a Christian station. We're a Salem station. Dennis Prager and Dave Ramsey and Hugh Hewitt are on the station. I'm the only woman on the station, but you are who you are. And if you can own who you are and use who you are in a positive way, as you mentioned in my intro, I am a mother. I am a grandmother, 17 grandbabies. The oldest is 12, the youngest is 6 weeks. Their future to me is a motivator, but I use who I am and who I know to bring about positive change. In this issue, in my particular issue, and I can't speak for the other leaders that listen, the predators don't care how we vote. They don't care really anything about us, except that they want to perpetuate a crime. So when I'm talking to leaders or people of influence that can help me, it's about finding commonality with them, about their shared interest in stopping the thing that I'm trying to stop. But to apply that to business, leaders have focus and priorities. And if you have something in your business world or even in your personal world that you can bring to the table that can create a positive impact or positive change, I always go and talk to the influencers, if you will, and find out what their priorities are and see where we have common ground so that I can be useful to the things that they need. And then in turn, when I need something, which is mostly to help somebody else, I find that they're there and willing to do that. It's about relationships. It's about building communication in a way so that when you call, I don't call every day, but when I call, they know it's significant. It needs pretty much immediate attention, and that we work together for a common goal of solving a problem. And many times these problems save lives in my situation.
Yeah, and unfortunately, common ground is getting increasingly difficult to find in our polarized culture. But it seems to me that, and what you're saying sounds like servant leadership. It sounds like, how do you serve others by finding common ground so that you can break through those kind of polarizing situations that we so often are dealing with?
Well, I think the culture right now, we have gotten to a place where, excuse this word, we kind of vomit on each other. We kind of say whatever we're thinking, and we Facebook or whatever social media, everyone gets out there and, kind of just has no filters. And I think that's abrasive. And I think that's not conducive. If what your ultimate goal is to take an issue or a complex problem or whatever it is, and you want to bring change about that, a positive change, if you don't seek out and listen to what the other person's priorities are, and you're just talking at people or you're just trying to march forward with your agenda, you're not enrolling people, you're not engaging them, you're not listening, you're not being compassionate. I think a servant leader is someone who understands that whereas you have something you're committed to, they do too. And until you understand where they're coming from, wherever you want, when I'm going to someone who I don't want to say want something from, but I want to understand what I need to do to reach this common ground, it takes a lot more listening than talking. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times people come in and they want to sell what they've got and they want to sell their ideas. And I was in sales a lot of years, so I'm good at that. But I find that the most useful information that I can get from other people is from me listening to them. And once I understand who they are and what their focus is and what matters to them, it makes it so much easier for me to map on the things that I'm working on to what they're doing. Now, that always doesn't work, but
Right.
majorly it does if you take the time to build those relationships. And if you do your research, like, I'm not calling some random person. I'm focused on people that are in the same area or the same, background that can help me solve this. But I think it's also important to understand that, people that are committed, that are other leaders, they seek out people that are really willing to do the work. And I think it's refreshing for leaders. A lot of people in leadership positions, people are always coming and asking them for stuff.
Right.
When you can come and provide something, you've done something that's not normal. You're doing it. It's another way to lead. You're saying, what are your needs? What can I do for you? And here's my resources. And I always say, if I said this once, I've said it a million times, it's all God's stuff. We take such proprietary, like, oh, this is ours and this is my space. It's not really. God doesn't need us. We need God, and God provides resources and relationships and connections. I always say I can't sing or dance. The only thing I am really good at is connecting, but I have gotten better at that over the years because I don't go in necessarily with an agenda, but I go in to listen, to figure out what can we do together that'll make a difference, even if we don't agree on everything. And I find that I still maintain, shocking as this is, I'm a conservative Republican, people know that, but I still maintain relations with people that are not. And I think that, and it doesn't make me a traitor or anything else, I do that because people are still people at their heart and their soul. And if we can stop politicizing things and start to depoliticize things, those that really are trying to create negativity and evil in the world, we will start to take away their power. And that's more important to me than getting some political win.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So I heard two things there. The first is problem solving. Good problem solvers are effective leaders. And I don't care if you're in a corporation or where you are, if you are a good problem solver, people need you because everybody has problems, whether it's in business. Yeah, everybody has problems, in all kinds. So if we come along and present ourselves as someone who we are here to help solve problems, I hear that as an entree, as a door in. The other thing I heard was listening. It's really as simple as it is profound. As I was training to be a leadership coach, a certified professional leadership coach, one of the great focuses that they had for us was active listening. And what they taught us was listening is not something that comes naturally. We hear things, but most of us are not good listeners because we've never been trained to be good listeners. And the idea of active listening, which is not only hearing things, but processing it as people are talking and reading between the lines and observing body language if we're, face to face, that is unfortunately becoming an increasingly lost art in our polarized talk past each other culture.
Guy, that's brilliant because it's so true. And when someone actually feels heard or acknowledged or appreciated, that's not normal anymore. And so if you can get to somebody by talking to them, and not get to them in any manipulative way, but actually get them and understand who they are and what matters to them, you can solve any problem in the world. You really can, because you now know what they want. And now it's just a matter of bringing other solutions, people, whatever, to the situation. And that's what gives me my juice. That's what I live for. It's like, if people tell me, that can't be done, that's where you'll find me. Right? Right now, fighting sex trafficking with the borders. What sane person would do what I do every day, except that there is, when we return that child or when we work with police, when we get clues, whatever it is, I have no greater reward. And I can think of no better use for my life at this point.
All right. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little here. Okay. Because we've been talking about the things that from a positive influence moving forward type perspective, thinking about the lessons that you have learned, because we all learn lessons as we get older. We try things, we do things. Sometimes we fail, sometimes we disappoint people. I mean, that's just life. Okay. But as you think about the lessons you've learned in this area of leadership, and as you look back, what would you say is one thing that if you could do it all over again, you would do differently?
As we get older, I think that we learn from those lessons. When I was young in my 20s and my 30s, I was so intent on proving myself and winning people over and more concerned about what people thought of me and did they like me and was I doing it right? And as I aged and got more confident and got better and was successful and actually earned success through hard work, those conversations in my own head seemed to go away. So I think that, I think the thing that has been the most valuable is to turn down the outside noise and really trust in that I have everything I need to be successful, that even failure and failing at something, I learned something. I ran for Congress. I didn't win, but I learned so much and I created so many great relationships. And my joke is now that when you come in second in Pima County for Congress, they give you your own radio show. So just being able to laugh at your failures, right? But my failures in my 20s and 30s were like just devastating, and my husband and I have been together, I don't normally talk about this, but my husband and I have been together 26 years, but I had 2 divorces. So before I have this great Christian family and this great man, and I didn't do that well. And God bless my husband. He had asked me 3 times before I finally said yes, because I was not going to do that. I wasn't going to fail again. So being willing to give it all you got, and whether you win or lose, if you gave it all you got, there's no shame in that. And there's no perfection either. Like there may be a perfection, right, but I've never attained it. And I think that not having any focus on that, but on really just going out and living the very best and giving your very best each day, and then give the rest to God. That's all you can do.
I want to focus in on what you said there about failing and failure. One of the things that I have found common among my coaching clients is this sense of I failed. I work with one individual who every time he fails, he equates it with being a failure. So the failing becomes part of his identity, and it's an enormously debilitating perspective on life. So every one of our listeners, they can cite things they did, they tried, they failed, and so on. But what you're saying is, if our perspective is such that failing is a life lesson, that we grow from that, if we look at it through the proper lens, then failing doesn't become failure.
Exactly. And you get to reinvent yourself. So you take the lesson in the failure. There's always a lesson there. I say that, when winning and losing, sometimes I think the losing team learns more than the winning team, because you have to take a time to evaluate, like, well, why did we lose? And you actually do, I think you do more analysis after you lose than when you win. And I think that that's probably one of the best life lessons I've learned. And not that I've had failures. Everyone does. But being responsible for what worked, what didn't work, what I could have done differently, and then taking what I could have done differently onto the next project and doing it differently. Don't, insanity, as they say, is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And to your friend that you're coaching, if he becomes the failure, that's doing the same thing over and over again. Have a failure, but then don't take it on. And I think that for me, our 7 kids, all married, all college educated, all got there in different paths. But I see a strength in not giving up. And I see a strength in everyone finding out what it is that they love and doing that. So many people in my life that have come into my life in the last few years are people that are struggling with something or big things. And just being able to be calm in the storm, and again, listening, and then figuring out what is the very best next step to do. And sometimes when you take that first step, then the next step, and it just starts to happen naturally. So now I will be 65 in August, which just makes me eligible for Medicare and Social Security. But it also gives me a lot of freedom and grace to just be who I am without any concern about, I feel very freed up and very blessed in my life. And so it is probably one of the, I feel the most comfortable in my entire life that I've been. I've had successes, I've had failures, but ultimately I feel I have a huge purpose, and having that purpose and not being obsessed by it, but allowing it to enrich my life and enrich those around me is really, it fills my heart. And I have a good life, and I am very grateful to God, but grateful to those that whose friendships I've made, who trust in me and who I get to interact with. And so I think having a good group of people around you matters too. And I think good leaders do. They involve themselves with other people that are up to something in their life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's important, that you surround yourself with people that call you, and people you can call and say, I'm in a funk. Here's what's going on. Coaching is Guy, to your point, coaching is a very, very important thing, to get feedback from someone who you trust and because sometimes we do get stuck. But being willing to not have that mean anything about us, I think that's the most important thing. It's like, okay, and what do I do to fix it? And I think that's, Sure. So that's kind of, if that helps.
Well, what you are speaking to right there is the process that my wife's a certified life coach, that we talk with our clients about, and that is the willingness to self-examine. Because that willingness to self-examine allows us to recognize the things that, we could have done better here. What did I learn there? And puts us on a continual path of growth and change in a positive way. And it increases our self-awareness as we grow as well. And that, to me, is a critical element of being a good leader is, do you self-examine? Are you self-aware? And, unfortunately, there are any number of people out there that they have titles. They're in roles with titles, but they do not self-examine. And they have so many blind spots, and people who are, under them, quote unquote, they see those blind spots, and it diminishes their influence as a leader. But the more that we're willing to self-examine, the greater our potential to fulfill that leadership calling that God has given us. And that's what I hear you referring to a few moments ago, is that aspect of being a self-examiner.
I think you have to do that. If you don't do that and you think you know everything or there's nothing more to learn, then what's the point? We all have something to learn. I'm always learning. I'm always learning from other people, and you can learn from other people's successes. You can learn from other people's failures. And hopefully, if you're really, like you said, self-examining, you have then something to contribute to others. And hopefully you can save people from failures, things that don't work or things that do work. When you find something that works, share the heck out of it. And when you find something that doesn't, share the heck out of that too.
Right, exactly.
It's all about making the world a better place, and not about making yourself better necessarily, although I think that happens naturally if you come from that point of generosity with your things, but generosity in communication and being willing, back to where we started, to listen.
Well, Kathleen, this has been very enjoyable to be with you today, get your insights on things. You mentioned, I think you said Project 25.
Yes. So Project 25, yes. It's info at Project 25 is project25.org. You can go to our website and take donations. I don't take a salary or anything. We give everything to technology for law enforcement. We've donated over $12 million so far.
Wow.
Yes. And since our inception, I'm very proud of that. And we continue to help victims' families find missing children, use technology. I just came back from a conference in Arkansas with 200 of the world's best technologists, FBI people. So we continue to look for the very best information out there to help our law enforcement.
That was Project 25. That's the number's 25?
Yeah, the number, Project 25, the number, and then .org.
Project25.org. Well, thank you so much, Kathleen, for joining the podcast today, taking the time out of your schedule. We appreciate it.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Guy. Have a great day. God bless.
As a certified professional leadership coach, I have the privilege of working with leaders of all ages and backgrounds, C-level executives, nonprofit leaders, small business owners, and self-employed professionals. I am passionately driven to help each of these men and women be better servant leaders every single day. In this podcast, my goal is to help you do the same. That's my calling. That's my mission. If this message speaks to you today, please subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform, or you can find it at YouTube, youtube.com// Flourishing Leadership, youtube.com/ Flourishing Leadership. And please let your friends and colleagues know about it, and check us out at flourishing-leadership.com, where you can learn more about my leadership coaching approach and methodology and how it can help you. You can also find all the podcast episodes housed there at that website. Because today, your leadership, flourishing leadership, has never been more needed.